There's something you should know about that Swiss watch on your wrist. The dial says Swiss made. The price says Geneva, but the case on a third of the mid-tier Swiss watches selling right now, and China is already in there. These watches aren't counterfeit and are completely legal, but there is a lot the brands collecting your money never had to tell you. And this is why I am here. What nobody talks about. There's a number buried inside Swiss federal law. It's 60%. What this means is that if 60% of a watch's total manufacturing costs happened in Switzerland, the brand can stamp Swiss made on the dial and charge accordingly. And by 60%, I don't mean 60% of the parts or of the labor. I am talking about 60% of the costs. Picture a movement built in Shenzhen. It's made by Chinese labor, tooling, and infrastructure. The cost to a brand is maybe $12 to source. Take that movement, install one Swiss-made balance wheel that costs $70 wholesale because of Swiss labor rates, and the 60% threshold on component value is now cleared. It doesn't matter even if every other piece came off a production line in Guangdong province. This works because Swiss components cost so much more than Chinese ones. A single expensive Swiss part can tip an otherwise Chinese movement across the legal line. This isn't a loophole someone stumbled across. The 2017 revision of the Swiss-made ordinance actually increased the headline requirement. It moved from a movement-only calculation to 60% of the full watch's manufacturing costs. Stricter on paper. But the same revision introduced an exception clause tied to a 2014 free trade agreement between Switzerland and China that set import tariffs on Chinese watch components to zero. The legal standard tightened. The supply chain economics simultaneously improved for sourcing from China. The door got officially narrower, and the path through it became cheaper in the same legislative act. The Oblogto watch investigation documented exactly how this plays out at mid-tier brands. A writer describing their experience at the Hong Kong Watch and Clock Fair spoke to the technical director of a medium to large Hong Kong-based conglomerate who explained the arrangement clearly. A Chinese-made case. Dial, hands, strap, buckle, and packaging, with a largely Chinese-built movement, qualifies as Swiss-made, once an expensive Swiss component enters the equation. Because the cost gap between Swiss and Chinese manufacturing is so vast, one pricey Swiss part tilts the accounting. The Oblogto watch piece concluded that watches from mid-tier and entry luxury brands priced between $1,000 and $5,000, and sometimes past that ceiling, have it easy when it comes to adding foreign-made components to their watches while keeping the Swiss-made dial text. But to understand why this matters now more than it did 10 years ago, you need to understand what's changed. A decade ago, a watch with Chinese components hiding behind a Swiss-made label was still almost certainly better than anything China could build and brand itself. The supply chain expertise lived in Geneva. The movement architecture lived in Le Locle and the Vallée de Joux. The finishing knowledge lived in the workshops of Glashütte and the Jura. You could argue the Swiss-made label was earning its premium, even at 60%. The premium was real. The sourcing was a cost management decision that didn't fundamentally change what you got. That argument is harder to make in 2026. Because the Chinese side of the supply chain has been absorbing precision manufacturing knowledge for 20 years through exactly those partnerships, and what it's producing now is not the same thing it was producing in 2014. Nobody lied, technically, but nobody advertised it either. If you have ever bought a watch in that price range and assumed every component was Swiss, you made a completely reasonable assumption. You were also wrong. And the industry knew that when they set the price. So the first real question is, which brands specifically made the decision to source from China, and how transparent have they been about it? Which watch in your collection has Swiss made on the dial? Drop the brand and the price you paid in the comments. Now, this is where it gets uncomfortable. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. That's why I created a complete insider guide to buying watches. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. The brands that already made the call. Omega gets named first. Omega is the second biggest watch brand on Earth by volume. It is right below Rolex in the aspirational tier. It charges between $6,000 and $10,000 for most of its core Seamaster lineup, and its sourcing situation became relatively public due to a 2016 Financial Times interview with CEO Reinhold Eschliman. A careful interpretation of what he said lends credibility to the idea that at least some percentage of Omega's components, including straps and bracelets, are sourced outside Switzerland, presumably in China or elsewhere in Southeast Asia. The collector community caught this detail years before the mainstream press investigated. Watch USEEK members noted that Omega might outsource bracelet links from China, with one forum commenter putting it plainly, "There's no reason a Chinese worker is incapable of making a bracelet link to the same standard as a Swiss one." But capability was never the issue. The issue is the margin. Swatch Group, which owns Omega, would never pass sourcing savings on to the customer, because cheaper watches are less desirable to the market they target. So the component gets cheaper, the retail price does not move. You pay the Swiss-made premium, and part of the watch may have been made elsewhere. The same Watch USEEK discussion raised a point that hadn't fully surfaced in the mainstream press at that point. Omega's CEO, in a podcast a few months earlier, had said that every component of Omega watches was made by companies in the Swatch Group. That's technically consistent with some of those Swatch Group companies having operations in China. The CEO said Swatch Group, not Switzerland. The difference matters. Tissot, Longines, Hamilton, all Swatch Group brands, all positioned across the mid-tier. When the former Swatch Group CEO spoke to Europa Star about Chinese manufacturing, he confirmed that certain bracelets, particularly low and mid-range ones, and sometimes hands, dials, and also packaging, are the main components of Swiss-made watches manufactured in China. He was discussing Swatch's own lower tiers, but the supply chain logic that makes Chinese manufacturing viable at entry price points travels up the ladder wherever the component cost math permits. Consider what Tissot charges for a PRX at roughly $500, or what Longines asks for an Hydro Conquest at around $1,000. These aren't budget watches. They carry the Swiss-made label as the central justification for their price point. The buyer paying $500 for a Tissot over a $200 Japanese Seiko is explicitly paying for the Swiss pedigree. If that pedigree contains Chinese components they were never told about, the premium they paid for is not entirely what they received. Frederique Constant is the clearest case. Its managing director, Niels Egerding, said the quiet part in a piece published by Rob Report. He confirmed that the brand sources cases from Asia and employs factories across the continent. His advice on managing the 60% threshold: when the percentage gets tight, take a dial from Switzerland to make sure it's respected. Frederique Constant charges $9,995 for a perpetual calendar and $15,695 for a tourbillon. Both carry Swiss made on the dial. Both may have Asian-sourced components. Both were priced on the assumption that the buyer wouldn't ask. And that assumption has worked for decades, because the entire marketing apparatus of the Swiss watch industry exists to make the question unnecessary. The boutique, the heritage story, the technical specifications framed as artisanal achievement, the collector community that defends brand prestige as personal identity. None of that infrastructure is designed to prompt someone to ask where the bracelet came from. But a system built on an unasked question is vulnerable the moment the question gets asked. And increasingly, it's being asked. There's a 2023 Watch USEEK thread discussing a Swatch Group employee who was terminated after revealing company practices on social media, including allegations about component sourcing and toxic workplace culture. Forum members noted that whatever the specifics of that situation, the broader question about Chinese parts in Omega watches was not a new discussion, and that the law mandating 60% of total value be made in Switzerland obviously leaves room for manufacturers to outsource the balance. The comment that stuck in that thread, Omega might outsource bracelet links, and the Chinese worker making them may be entirely capable of matching Swiss quality. But Swatch would never pass the savings on because cheaper watches are less desirable to the market they target. So the buyer pays the premium. The component is cheaper, The brand keeps the difference. The sourcing story is uncomfortable. The growth story is the one that should keep Geneva up at night. What Seiko already knows. Seiko's situation is different from Switzerland's. Where Swiss brands operate under a legal label with ambiguity engineered into its structure, Seiko manufactures watches in multiple countries and marks each one accordingly. Watches that say "Made in Japan" on the dial were produced or assembled in domestic facilities in Iwate and Nagano prefectures, where some of Seiko's finest mechanical work happens. Models assembled outside Japan carry different code designations in the reference number. References ending in J are Japanese assembled. References ending in K indicate assembly outside Japan. A Seiko 5 Sports assembled in a Chinese facility will tell you, if you know how to read the code on the case back. A Swiss-made watch assembled with Chinese components doesn't have to tell you anything, because the law doesn't require disclosure. That distinction says more about the two industries' relationship with transparency than any marketing campaign could. Seiko and Rolex are the only two watch companies considered truly vertically integrated, meaning each can design and develop all the components of a watch, as well as assemble, adjust, inspect, and ship them in-house. The Spring Drive, the new caliber 9RB2, announced in April 2025 that achieved accuracy of plus or minus 20 seconds per year in a mainspring-driven watch, the 9SA5 Dual Impulse Escapement. All of these come from Japanese facilities, built by artisans who have done this specific work for decades. The spring drive's mechanism is unlike anything else in the watch industry. It uses a conventional mainspring to drive the hands, but replaces the traditional mechanical escapement with a tri-synchro regulator, where an electromagnetic glide spring acts as a brake, governed by an integrated circuit. The result is an accuracy figure plus or minus 15 seconds per month at minimum in standard calibers, that mechanical escapements can't approach at any price. Switzerland has never produced anything like it, and nobody in China has replicated it either. But to keep entry-level and mid-range models affordable, Seiko operates facilities in Malaysia, China, and Singapore. Some Seiko 5 Sports references come from Malaysian assembly. Some budget quartz models are assembled in China. The movements are always engineered in Japan. The finishing standards are always Seiko's own. But the Seiko 5 at $250 is not a fully Japanese watch, and Seiko doesn't pretend otherwise if you know where to look. This matters because Seiko has spent 60 years building a story. Japan offers a third path. Not Swiss luxury pricing with its boutique overhead and supply chain ambiguity. Not Chinese budget quality with its concessions. Japanese precision at an honest price. That story is real. It's also under pressure from below. Below the spring drive ceiling, in the $600 to $1,500 band where the volume lives, the gap between a Seiko Presage and a well-executed Chinese mechanical watch is closing faster than most collector conversations acknowledge. A Seiko Presage cocktail time runs between $285 and $500 at retail. The Presage Classic series runs to around $950. Either way, they're competing against Chinese mechanical pieces at $200 that pass loop inspection at watch meetups without embarrassment. That comparison would have been absurd 8 years ago. Today, collectors are making it without irony. The Seiko value proposition doesn't collapse overnight. It erodes. The buyer who would have bought a Seiko Presage as their first serious mechanical watch is now more likely to buy a San Martin or Chronos first, enjoy it for a year, and only upgrade to Seiko if they find themselves wanting something the cheaper watch can't provide. Some of them will find that thing, many won't. Seiko loses those buyers to the entry point, and the entry point belongs to Shenzhen. I don't think Seiko has fully reckoned with the pace of that compression. And the pace hasn't slowed. Seiko has the spring drive. Most of what China is building now doesn't need to match it. It just needs to be good enough to make you question the price gap between them. The Rolex exception that reveals everything. Rolex doesn't belong in this conversation as a warning. It belongs as the measuring stick. Every component in a Rolex, metals, ceramics, movements, dials, is produced in-house across 4 specialized Swiss facilities: headquarters and final assembly in Acacias, case and materials production at Plan-les-Ouai, dial and gem setting at Chênebourg, and movement manufacturing at Bienne. No external suppliers are used for core components. Rolex doesn't just clear the 60% threshold. It manufactures at 100% by deliberate choice, because that vertical integration is the actual product Rolex sells, not the watch. The integration. Rolex alloys its own gold in 3 formulations and manufactures its own 904L stainless steel, a grade normally used in aerospace and chemical engineering. The Cerachrom ceramic bezel material, in-house. The Parachrom hairspring, in-house. The Paraflex shock absorbers, in-house. The crystals, the finishing tools, the proprietary polishing machinery. Rolex is, in the technical sense, not a watch company that happens to make components. It's a materials science company that built a watch business around what it manufactures. Consider what that actually means on a practical level. When Rolex raises the price of a Submariner by 5%, that increase reflects real cost pressure inside a manufacturing chain Rolex owns and controls. Rising steel costs, rising labor costs in Geneva and Bienne, rising investment in the machinery that makes the next generation of movements. There's a traceable relationship between input and output. The price increase is annoying. It's not dishonest. When a mid-tier Swiss brand raises prices 5% and their bracelets come from Shenzhen, that relationship is murkier. The increase reflects brand positioning and margin management, not necessarily higher manufacturing costs, because the manufacturing got cheaper while the price went up. This matters because when a buyer pays $11,350 for a steel Submariner, none of that money flows to a Chinese bracelet factory. None of it subsidizes a supply chain the customer was never told about. The price is high. The manufacturing cost behind it is also high. There's a real relationship between what you pay and what was spent building the thing. Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, same category. These are brands where Swiss made means what most buyers believe it means across the whole industry, because those brands decided to build everything in-house rather than extract margin through supply chain savings. They could outsource. They chose not to. That choice has real costs, and they charge for those costs. The rest of the industry chose differently. Switzerland's top tier is protected. The middle, where most people spend their money, is where it gets complicated. What China is actually building. The supply chain relationship between China and the Swiss watch industry was never one-directional. When Swiss companies set up facilities in China to produce components at lower cost, the knowledge transfer ran both ways. Chinese engineers and technicians working to Swiss tolerances absorbed capabilities that were once exclusively concentrated in the Jura Arc and the canton of Geneva. That education didn't stay on the production floor. In 2021, Seiko Design won the Challenge Watch Prize at the Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève, the most prestigious independent watchmaking competition in the world, with its Blue Planet piece. The GPHG jury doesn't award prizes for marketing budgets or brand heritage. It grades movement architecture, finishing execution, and technical originality. Seiko Design was the first Chinese brand ever to win it. Several Swiss brands that didn't make the shortlist that year have been in business for over a century. That result wasn't a lucky outlier, it was a signal. Shenzhen produces 4 million watches annually compared to Switzerland's 300,000. That volume has built a component supply chain of extraordinary depth. Cases, dials, bracelets, crystals, movement components, sourced, machined, finished, and shipped within the same industrial cluster, where workforce density keeps costs lower than anything Geneva can match without the legal framework that lets them charge Geneva prices for the result. That infrastructure is moving up the price ladder. Memorigin has been producing tourbillon watches for over a decade and now retails pieces above $5,000. Barons, founded in Shenzhen in 2012, builds complex mechanical pieces with original movement architectures and has received design recognition at international exhibitions. Seiko Design sits between $1,000 and $4,000, with finishing quality that collectors in Europe and Asia describe without embarrassment, alongside mid-tier Swiss. Think about what it takes to tell that story in a watch forum. Collector communities are not kind to inferior products. The people on Watch You Seek, who have spent years dissecting movements under loupes, reading Jaeger-LeCoultre caliber specifications for fun, debating the relative merits of hand beveling versus machine chamfering, are not going to validate a Chinese watch out of politeness or politics. When those collectors start saying a San Martin case finishing passes at this price, that isn't enthusiasm. That's a data point. A San Martin GMT built on an ST2130 movement retails around $200. It passes loop inspection against comparably priced Swiss pieces at those same meetups. That wouldn't have been true 5 years ago. The gap between what a Chinese movement does and what a Swiss movement does at the same price tier has compressed to the point where, for most practical purposes, it no longer justifies the premium differential on its own. So Omega should worry not, because China is in its supply chain. Swatch Group made that choice deliberately, and it worked for a generation. Omega should worry, because the customer who eventually connects both facts, Chinese components in my Swiss-made watch, Chinese watches now matching Swiss quality at a fraction of the price, is the same customer who stops renewing the premise. And that customer is already out there. They're posting on WatchUSeek, leaving reviews on WatchCrunch, sharing caseback codes in collector forums, and asking questions the brands can't answer with marketing copy. Not a trend. The leading edge of a shift the Swiss industry should have seen coming and largely didn't, because for years the premium held without pressure to justify it. That's the supply chain story. The brand story, the one about what people are actually paying for, is where it gets personal. What you are actually buying. Walk into an Omega boutique. The overhead lighting is calibrated to make every dial catch your eye from across the room. The display case may have temperature control. The sales associate has memorized the full history of the Speedmaster's NASA certification and knows which Bond film featured which reference number. The box has weight. The warranty card has a font that cost someone money to design. Now add up what maintains that experience. Boutique rent in a prime city. Global advertising spend that, in some years, exceeds the total manufacturing cost of the watches being advertised. Athlete endorsement contracts. Brand ambassador arrangements. Trade show infrastructure at Watches and Wonders. Editorial relationships with magazines that depend on luxury advertising for survival. The box, the warranty card, the branded polishing cloth, the after-sales service network across 40 countries. Divide all of that overhead across every watch the brand sells in a year. That number is embedded in the price of the watch you're holding. Studies carried out by ETH Zurich and the University of St. Gallen showed that consumers are prepared to pay up to 20% more for a Swiss watch, and up to 50% more for certain mechanical ones. The Swiss-made label isn't just a manufacturing standard, it's a pricing instrument. When the manufacturing behind the label can include Chinese components by law, the pricing instrument becomes partially untethered from the thing it certifies. You're paying the Swiss-made premium on a watch that may be, in some measurable percentage, Chinese-made, legally, with no obligation of disclosure on the dial. That's not a scandal. It's a system operating exactly as the people who designed it intended. Here's where it gets personal, though. Think about the buyer who saved up for their first serious watch. 6 months of setting aside money. The moment they walked into an authorized dealer and said the words. The sales associate who treated them like someone who deserved to be there. The weight of the box on the way home. The watch on the wrist the next morning. None of that was fake. The experience was real. The emotion was real. The watch itself works perfectly. The movement keeps time. The case is solid. The crystal is scratch-resistant. The warranty is real. But embedded in the price they paid was a portion of margin extracted from the gap between what the supply chain actually cost and what Swiss-made implies. They didn't pay for Swiss precision all the way down. They paid for Swiss precision at the final assembly and a story all the way down. The story cost more than the components. Most of them will never know, and the brands are counting on that. There's nothing illegal about this. There's nothing even particularly unusual about it. Almost every luxury category in the world operates on the same logic. Premium pricing captures the aspiration, not just the object. The Hermes bag, the Bottega Veneta wallet, the premium denim brand. They're all selling a story that costs more to maintain than the product costs to make. The difference in watches is that the Swiss-made label reads as a quality certification, not a brand certification. Buyers understand they're paying for Hermès marketing. Many don't understand they're paying for Geneva marketing when they buy a mid-tier Swiss watch. That's the gap. But here's the observation the collector community hasn't fully processed. The brands most exposed to China's rise aren't necessarily the ones that cheapened their supply chains. Those brands already conceded that the Swiss-made story was partly a financial construction, and they've been extracting margin from that construction for years. The brands facing the most pressure are the honest ones: Seiko, Tudor at the accessible tier, modest Swiss manufacturers building real watches at fair prices without boutique overhead, because those brands compete against a Chinese industry that now produces at comparable quality with none of the legacy infrastructure costs. A Chinese brand selling a good mechanical watch at $400 doesn't need to defeat Rolex. It just needs to give you a reason not to spend $750 on a Seiko Presage. That's a much simpler argument to win. And in markets where the mythology of Swiss-made or made in Japan carries less cultural weight than it does in Europe or North America, those arguments are already being won. The competitive logic is clear, but the thing that actually decides these markets is messier than logic. The question nobody is asking out loud: what does Swiss-made mean when China is already inside it? The honest answer: less than most buyers think. For most brands, the label still guarantees that technical development happened in Switzerland. Still means final assembly and quality control happened in Switzerland. Still means a Swiss engineer signed off before the watch shipped. Those things are real. But it doesn't mean every component was touched by Swiss hands in a Swiss workshop, and the industry has never volunteered that clarification, because the clarification costs money. For Rolex, Patek, AP, and a handful of truly vertically integrated manufacturers, the label means exactly what most buyers believe it means across the whole industry. For a significant portion of the mid-tier, it means 60% of the cost cleared the threshold. For brands closest to that floor, it means a compliance calculation performed quarterly. That gap between what the label implies and what it legally requires has existed for decades. What changed is that the alternative to believing the implication is now visible, affordable, and improving every year. China isn't threatening to infiltrate the Swiss watch industry. The infiltration already happened through a legal framework that Swiss lawmakers built with enough flexibility to let their industry compete globally on labor costs while keeping the right to print Swiss made on the result. The brands that made that choice made it deliberately, knowing what it meant. What China is building now is something different, not infiltration of an existing system, a replacement of the premise. A generation of watchmakers who learned precision manufacturing by working to Swiss and Japanese specifications, who have access to the world's deepest component supply chain in Shenzhen and Guangdong, and who are now building domestic brands with original movements, original design languages, and original stories. Those brands don't need the Swiss-made label. They're building a story to replace it, aimed first at the 1.4 billion people in their domestic market who are, in increasing numbers, choosing domestic luxury out of preference rather than compromise. Omega should worry because the customer who notices Chinese components in their Swiss-made watch is the same customer who starts asking what $350 buys from Shenzhen in 2026. That customer doesn't go back to a more expensive version of the same thing. The trust, once broken, doesn't reassemble itself through marketing spend. Seiko should worry because the story Seiko built over 60 years, that Japan offers a third path between Swiss luxury pricing and Chinese budget quality, depends on the gap between Japanese and Chinese manufacturing staying wide enough to justify a price difference. The spring drive exists at a level nobody in China has replicated. Below that, the gap is closing, and the pace hasn't slowed. The brands that survive this decade won't be the ones that protected the label. They'll be the ones that built something the label couldn't fake. Rolex understood that before most of their competitors had finished reading the 2017 ordinance, the rest of the industry is still catching up, and the clock is moving faster than any of their in-house movements. 70 years of reputation doesn't disappear overnight, but it can erode in a decade if the thing that made the reputation gets commoditized by someone building it without the overhead. That's what China is doing, not loudly, Not with a press release, just with better tolerances, lower prices, and a workforce that was trained by the same supply chain their customers are still funding. Do you think Swiss made should require 100% Swiss manufacturing? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe.